Hey everybody, welcome back for week 3 of my devlog. If you missed the last video, last week I worked on ammo and reloading, enemy attacking the player, and 2 new enemy types. This week, got some cool new stuff for you, made a lot of good progress. The enemies now drop money, the shop was added to the game, and the first 6 items that will appear in that shop. Let's get right into it. You might notice some slight visual differences here. I'm continuing to try to improve visibility and just the overall aesthetic. So I did a palette pass on the whole game, all the textures and sprites, and now we are conforming to the original Doom and Doom 2 palette, which is a pretty lenient palette, all things considered, but it's nice for the textures in particular, since they have a lot more color variation than the pretty basic sprites. I also moved the lights from the inner column to the outer wall and added 2 more. So it should be quite a bit brighter in this basin area now. I realize that the enemies are going to be facing the outer wall more often than the inner column. So because they're facing away from the light source, if I have it on the column, they're going to be dark most of the time. So moving into the outer wall should just overall improve visibility. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. So first of all, money. This is pretty straightforward. It's basically a score. Whenever, you'll notice in the bottom right, whenever I'm killing an enemy, I get money. And I can tweak how much money each enemy gives me based on, the difficulty of the enemy. I want to note here, a lot of horde games, at least recently with this bullet heaven trend, they typically have the money be a dropped item that the player then has to get close enough to actually pick it up. And it actually becomes part of the mechanics of the game. There's like a pickup range and all that good stuff. So I'm actually foregoing that here, and I'm going to do the Call of Duty Zombies approach, I guess, and have the money basically be a score, be points. And part of the reason I'm doing that is performance. I don't like the idea of having a bunch of clutter along the ground, and I know there's ways to kind of optimize it, but I'd rather not trade some of my performance that could be spent on having a bunch of enemies on screen at once, or more complicated like lighting setups or whatever, when I don't think it really benefits my game that much to have it like bullet heavens, where you have to actually pick up the money. This arena in particular is very small, and you're basically going to be moving in a circle around it the whole time anyway, so you wouldn't be going out of your way like you would in, say, Vampire Survivors, where the map is massive and there's a little bit of strategy involved in kiting enemies around to maximize the amount of experience you're picking up. So I spent a lot of time this week working on the shop, and here it is. Right now, I don't have the portal that is going to appear after every wave that will teleport you to the shop. So I'm just using a dev console command to teleport myself in and out. But you may be wondering why the shop looks like an art gallery from hell, literally. And that's partially because it is, or kind of is. So when I was designing up the shop, I originally was not going to have it look like this. I was going to have a much more, I guess, traditional looking shop. Maybe some weirdness about it, but nothing too crazy. But as I was designing it, in particular, I was having trouble with, it seems like it'd be a really easy thing. It's basically just a box. But I wanted to have separate textures on the floor, ceiling, and the 4 walls. And the way I was doing it, it was a little hard to actually implement that. And while I was, messing around with different game objects, I accidentally deleted all the walls. It might have been intentional, but anyway, I deleted all the walls, and then I just saw this black void with a floating floor and ceiling. I was like, actually, I don't hate this design, because the shop is basically supposed to be like a pocket dimension that you get teleported into. And I'm going to add a shopkeeper, actually. He's going to be a fun little character, but he's not in quite yet. And that there's some empty space you'll notice at the two ends of the shop. And that's basically, one end's going to be the portal to leave, and then one end's going to be the shopkeeper, who you'll be able to talk to a little bit. Just for fun, not really a mechanical thing, unless I'd maybe add in the ability to kill him and take all the items. Could be a thing. But for now, you come in here, there'll be 6 items, and you can buy whatever you have the money for. And eventually I'm going to implement like reserving or locking or freezing. Games use different terms for it, the items, so that next time you come to the shop, it won't be replaced by a new item. And of course, there'll be, re-rolling eventually. That's a roguelite staple. So, okay, so let's talk about the meat of this, the items themselves. So I've got 6 items in right now. Well, 5 that you can actually buy. There's another one that's kind of a special case. I don't want to go through all the items yet. I want to leave some things for you to discover when you get your hands on the game yourself. I spent a lot of time making sure they looked just how I had imagined them in the shop themselves. So we got them, they kind of bob up and down. We got like a rarity spotlight on them that changes color based on how rare the item is. So the items themselves, we have the mystery box, appropriately themed Christmas present. The mystery box will just give you a random item, basically, that from any other item in the pool. And the rarities it rolls are the same as the rarities that the shop itself rolls. So what's interesting about this is an uncommon green item, which means it's the prices may change, but it's slightly more expensive than the lowest rarity of item. But you have I think it's a 65% chance of getting a common item. So you're kind of gambling with this a little bit, but the benefit of this item is that you can just spend the price of an uncommon item and get a rare, or even if you're really lucky, a super rare item. So this is the gambling item, I guess. Next up, we have shock shells, which have an on-hit effect where there's a chance to spawn in a lightning bolt that attacks a random enemy somewhere in the stage. And I neglected to mention this, but most items in this game are actually going to stack. Right now they can stack to 7, most of them. Some of them will be unique and only have a max stack of 1, but it's similar to Risk of Rain, is the idea where there's not like, it's not a Binding of Isaac situation where you have like 400 items or whatever. Instead, you have more limited, more focused item pool. But because you can stack the items, the effects, the individual items will get stronger as you stack them. So for the shock shells, the chance that any individual pellet will actually trigger the on-hit effect goes up the more you stack it. And if you have 7 shock shells, you're pretty much guaranteed to have at least 1 lightning bolt every time you hit an enemy. Fun little item, nice for clearing big hordes. All right, so last item I want to talk about is actually the only super rare item in the game currently. It's the mega shells. Now, the mega shells are a unique item, meaning you can only have 1. And the reason that you can only have 1 is they have a very unique effect of actually doubling the number of pellets you shoot and also increasing spread and recoil effects pretty significantly. So being able to shoot double pellets is essentially doubling your damage. Of course, you have to account for the increased spread, but it does mean you can, for example, one-shot bystanders if you're close enough. The really interesting thing about the mega shells is the recoil effect. So movement, I haven't really shown it off yet, but the movement in this game is going to be heavily tied into the recoil of your shotgun. Both the horizontal recoil, so you can actually move around quicker by basically blasting yourself around backwards, which may be advantageous in the future when projectile shooting enemies get added, for example. But the real fun thing is shotgun jumping. So if you're aiming down, there's actually a vertical recoil and you get launched up. And when you have mega shells, that effect is increased. So you can get some pretty good air. And since enemies can only attack you if you're, basically right in front of them, melee enemies anyway, this can actually be a pretty effective technique to avoid a horde if you get trapped. Oh, and speaking of spending money, this week I spent some money IRL on something pretty interesting. Maybe I'll give you a little sneak peek of it here. Okay. You're not ready for it yet. You got to save some of that for when you get your hands on the demo. Speaking of which, I know in the first video I said I was kind of trying to push for a playable demo at the end of this month. And well, we're coming up at the end of the month. I can give you a more confident date now, I guess. I'm feeling pretty good. I've made a list of everything I want in for the demo. And end of the month is going to be a little too soon. So I'm aiming for early to mid-January now. Next week, I'm going to be focusing on waves, everything about waves. Enemies spawning in through portals. Of course, the shop portal is going to show up at the end of waves. Spawning in more varied hordes instead of just the same group of enemies randomly. Actually finishing a wave by killing all the enemies in it, all that good stuff. And that's probably going to involve a few new enemies, including maybe even some elite enemies. And of course, I'm going to be adding in items now. I have a pretty good framework just to, draw up a new item, drop it in the game, give it an effect, and you're good to go there. So I'm going to add in a few more items, aiming to have about 15, I think, for the demo. Hopefully that's a good number. It's just a matter of how many I can kind of slip in there while I'm working on other things. And with that, I think I've covered everything I want to for this week. So Merry Christmas to you. And if I don't talk to you before then, Happy New Year's. But I think I might be able to sneak next video out before the holiday. I'm not sure. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, helps out if you engage with the video a little bit, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time.